So we must do two things, two great things together, to encompass that enormous new view that lies before us, but to encompass it within the framework of science, to see it within the whole categorical framework of science, and to see that these two are not separate, but that they are wedded. The bigness of the idea, the newness of the idea, the greatness of it is one with the structure of science, the structure of being itself. We said that there is a hint to the seventh. Actually, there have been hints all along the way, more and more hints as we have touched the subjects of life and of truth, and even hints in the subject of principle. But here in Truth as Love, she says the Master's injunction is that we pray in secret and let our lives attest our sincerity. So there is a praying in secret, which is a truth tone of consciousness, but the letting our lives attest our sincerity hints to the openness of love, the openness of the seventh prayer. So the attractor for everything is love. The attractor for the first 6 prayers is the prayer of love, that prayer which then is lifted up to the Lord's Prayer. So in the creative evolution of consciousness, the point of truth and love, we see that the goal of truth is reached, but that goal is hinting to the greater goal, to the greater attractor, the next attractor, namely to create perfect openness to love, to become a perfect dynamic openness to love. But in order to do that, we see that we have first had to grow to the point of being organizationally closed. And we've looked at the organizational closedness of the consciousness of truth. Now love comes in, and it is one great jubilant glorification of God, this tone of love. It is the prayer of praise. Christians rejoice, she says. Christians rejoice in secret beauty and bounty, hidden from the world but known to God. They rejoice within their principle. They do not only rejoice in secret, but with the whole environment, with the whole universe. And we will see how this is developed and how the Lord's Prayer shows us that. Yeah, I've got so many things I want to say. Christians rejoice in secret beauty and bounty. When I was doing some research on the word dynamic, I found of all things that the root of the term dynamic is the same root for beauty and bounty. I haven't finished that investigation, but I was struck by that to see that the attractor in that whole dynamic field of evolution of consciousness is the state of beauty and bounty. So, what is the epitome for love? It is the prayer of glorifying the perfection of being and that this brings us into unity with the perfection of love. It is that prayer of praise prayer lifted to the point of love becomes praise, doesn't it? The praising of that which is, the glorification of that which is, and this is a dynamic state of complete openness. So it is the prayer of perfection. Behind that stands the perfection principle, and we see in this final subject then the principle of perfect openness, and we see the integration principle. The whole point of intersection of the Word as a dynamic evolution within us reaches its equifinality. The prayer of praising is the prayer of praising the wonder of divine consciousness, the consciousness within us. It is the ceasing of the accentuation on affirmations and denials of affirming anything, and it is instead the resting in that which has been affirmed. The dynamic rest in that which has been made conscious to us in order to contemplate the universe which God knows. And so that rest in the consciousness of what God is and what He does gives us a sense of being held in love. We feel held in love. We feel that we are love's object, the beloved of love. And it is this consciousness that is also a dynamic and scientific sense of loving our neighbor. I don't know whether to tell you this now or tell you this later. It is so beautiful because how is that openness indicated? How is the open system indicated? We get those many, many indications of love, but how is it different? How do we move from the closed to the open sense within us? Well, you see, it's Christians rejoice. It isn't just that you are now a Christian, alone in the world, isolated in the world. You rejoice within yourself and so forth secretly. It's Christians rejoice. You feel that that which was within now goes without, now looks outward, that the organizational closeness now is so mature that it can look outward, can go outward to its universe, its environment. So the direction goes from being integrated within, which is really what truth as love would show us, that the closedness within us, the organizational closeness, is totally integrated. But then we see that we take the other direction, that we are integrated into the greater whole. We are integrated, we are nested into the greater and greater whole, and so we are nested into our universe, into our universal principle. And this is shown forth actually in the Lord's Prayer as well, because that prayer, yes, you see, here in the seventh, it is the seventh prayer then that integrates all 7 prayers into the one prayer, the Lord's Prayer, and is indicating our openness, because it says our. our Father, which art in heaven. What else? Our Father, which art in heaven. Give us, lead us, enable us, deliver us. We. So let's begin that subject of love, which is rather brief by comparison. Love as mind. This prayer of perfection is a prayer which only knows perfection and calls down infinite blessings in that knowing. Christians rejoice in secret beauty and bounty, hidden from the world but known to God. And now she is going to give us a summary of the first 6 subjects, but from the point of view of love, and show that this is what constitutes the perfection within us that prays at the point of love, and the worthiness of us, the trustworthiness of us to receive holiness. Self-forgetfulness, mind, purity, and affection, spirit, are constant prayers, soul. Practice, not profession, principle. Understanding, not belief, life. Gain the ear and right hand of omnipotence, truth. And they assuredly call down infinite blessings, love. This is our trustworthiness, and trustworthiness is the foundation of enlightened faith. Without a fitness for holiness, we cannot receive holiness. So, you see that we have been fit for holiness, haven't we? The holiness of love. We've been fit through those prayers to receive holiness. And so now you have it. Why? Because like produces like. Huh? It's autocatalytic, isn't it? The whole process is autocatalytic. Fitness for holiness receives holiness. Like produces like. Here in love, like has attracted like. So we are brought into the oneness and unity with love. Love is spirit. The highest worship presupposes a great sacrifice of material things. A great sacrifice of material things must precede this advanced spiritual understanding. Well, it has, hasn't it? By being true to the word of life, that sacrifice has been made all along the way, to sacrifice that which is unlike mind within us, unlike spirit, unlike soul, unlike principle, life, truth. This is the great sacrifice of material things, which involves or implies material goals and so forth. That the material goals have been sacrificed for the goal of love. The highest prayer is not one of faith merely, then, you can see. It is demonstration. It's what you have demonstrated. You've demonstrated love, right? Through that sacrifice of that which is unlike mind, spirit, soul, principle, life, and truth, you have demonstrated love. Such a prayer heals the sick and must destroy sin and death. Another must indicating this is a law. This is a law that heals sickness and destroys sin and death. It distinguishes between truth that is sinless and the falsity of sinful sense. So the highest worship is one that presupposes that sacrifice of material things for the things of God. Love is soul. It is the prayer of soul. This prayer of perfection is the prayer of soul. It covers all human needs. Our master, she refers us to the ideal cybernetic consciousness, dynamic consciousness. Our master taught his disciples one brief prayer. So to say, this, everything that we have seen and experienced can be summed up in, can be reduced in, can be epitomized by one brief prayer, which we name after him the Lord's Prayer. Our Master said, "After this manner, therefore, pray ye." That you can integrate it now, can integrate everything into this prayer. And then he gave that prayer which covers all human needs. There is indeed some doubt among Bible scholars whether the last line is not an addition to the prayer by a later copyist, but this does not affect the meaning of the prayer itself. Its meaning is assured. Its meaning is certain. So the Lord's Prayer, again, she says, is the prayer of soul. It is also the prayer of love because it covers all human needs. Love is principle. That the prayer of perfection within us is the scientific apprehension of God that delivers from the evil one. So this one prayer of soul, which covers all human needs, is the prayer that frees us from the one evil. The one prayer frees us from the one evil. That's an indication of the equipollence of it. That it's a prayer of love, of equipollence, of the allness of God, which is the solution to the question of evil. It deals with the noumenon of evil, of error. So in the phrase, deliver us from evil, the original properly reads, deliver us from the evil one. This reading strengthens our scientific apprehension of the petition. For Christian Science teaches that the evil one, or one evil, is but another name for the first lie and all liars. So we get a touch of that love is a principle, and that this prayer of love within us, which is a prayer of perfection, is the prayer that will establish the consciousness of equipollence within us, the oneness of love, the unity of love. And so we come to love as life, truth, and love. And she says, only as we rise above all material sensuousness and sin can we reach the heaven-born aspiration, life. and spiritual consciousness, truth, which is indicated in the Lord's Prayer and which instantaneously heals the sick, love. So we have as life that the prayer of perfection gives us, that heaven-born aspiration. It exalts us. That as truth, it gives us that spiritual consciousness, the perfection and allness of spiritual consciousness, that love nurtures our spiritual consciousness. And as truth, that this prayer, which is a prayer of equipolence, instantaneously heals the sick. Because to love there is no sick. There is no sick. So love is completely taking care of everything, taking care of us through the nature of the seven. And that brings us to the Lord's Prayer, which we said is the one integrated prayer of love, the divine principle, love. So we see a system really, we see that we are a system set in the greater system now. Set in the greater pattern, the greater scale, the higher scale. Now, because our direction is outward. It is still toward God. It is always toward God, whether we are at the point of truth or love, organizationally closed in our closet, we're directed toward God, or whether it is outward, environmentally, energetically opened outward. It is always toward God. But in that outward direction, the system is nested within the whole network of being, within the whole universe. And that's what love wants to do. It wants to make us universal. So let us begin, and we see that the Lord's Prayer is the attractor for all seven prayers. You see that those seven prayers are integrated into the Lord's Prayer. They are nested within the Lord's Prayer. So it is a prayer of the glorification of the self-organizing principle, love, as the ego. This is the ego. The self has been subordinated. The self has gone out. And so it is the prayer of soul, of congruency with the one ego, of selflessness, of oneness with the one ego. And the true prayer, the Lord's Prayer, is a dynamic state, is itself a dynamic state of self-organization, because it is structured by the sevenfold nature and by the fourfold operation of God, by the calculus, by the self-organizing principle. And so that prayer begins, Our Father. Our Father which art in heaven. Mrs. Eddy lifts this up to our Father, Mother, God. And we can see that our is the fact that there is but one I, or us. The us is the consciousness of the I. It is the I am being conscious of itself. That is the consciousness of the hour, the standpoint of the our Father, which art in heaven. And Mrs. Eddy says, our Father, Mother God, all harmonious, and we see that we come to the equifinality of having been fluctuated at the point of mind. If we go back and we think about that first prayer of mind, it was the prayer of mind that fluctuated us with the nature of God, the very first point. And so we come to the equifinality of that spiritual fluctuation of mind. That the divine attractor behind that first subject is the information principle. The attractor behind it is the Father, Mother God, all harmonious. The divine self-organizing principle, love, as mind, as the Father, Mother God, the Father, Mother, mind, all harmonious. And so we could pray in a way as to say, love, you are the all-harmonious principle, the principle of all harmony. It's you, it is love. Love is mind. The divine principle, love, is mind. The origin of everything within us, the origin of our cybernetic nature, is the Father, Mother God, all harmonious. And that principle, that divine self-organizing principle, love, is spirit. Hallowed be thy name. Adorable one, Mrs. Eddy says, that this is the adorable one, set apart, that love is the only thing, that divine self-organizing principle, love as spirit, is the only thing, the only value, the only thing we could look at, could ever look at. And it is set apart, sanctified by spirit, because it is spirit, because love, you are the only thing operating, you are the only nature that is expressing itself, adoring itself. So we've come to the equifinality of that spiritual autocatalysis within us, as it was working and working, as spirit was working and working to form us into a perfect dynamic state of prayer. And the attractor, the divine attractor behind that autocatalysis of spirit, is the ordering principle. And that principle is spirit, the adorable one. Thy kingdom come. So we come to soul. Thy kingdom come, the original is. And at this point in the text, she lifts that up, lifts it up into something that would be sacrilegious to the world. Sacrilegious. Thy kingdom is come. Why sacrilegious? Because the whole world has been waiting for the kingdom to come. And that this would be connected with the 7,000-year period, with the return of Jesus, or the return of the Christ coming again. And so the world waits for this. One part of the world waits for the Christ to come for the first time. Much of the rest of the world waits for it to come the second time. But a small, what would you say, enclave, a small group, a remnant, rejoice in secret beauty and bounty. rejoice in the fact that thy kingdom is come, that the Christ science has come. This is why she could say that, and put it right in the first chapter of her textbook to tell every reader that the Christ is here. So thy kingdom is come, thou art ever present, the millennium consciousness is now. It's now. So it is the rule of soul, the control of soul, the regime of soul, the realm of soul at this point. Thy kingdom come, we find the equifinality now of the what we saw in soul as the spiritual self-regulation within us, that the divine attractor behind that self-regulation, behind that steady state of soul that has been raised up within us, is the identity principle. It is soul itself. It is the fact that the Christ, the cybernetic Christ idea, is established. Thy will be done. You see, in soul, it's a prayer within us, isn't it? That says within us, that praises within us, that acknowledges. It's not an asking for something. It's not a reaching out for or toward something in the sense of having to gain something, but it is a conscious acknowledgement of that which is. Love, thy realm is here. Your realm is here. Your realm is established. You are everywhere. The divine self-organizing principle is everywhere, is ever present. Doesn't have to come. We don't have to hope that the divine cybernetic principle will work in our lives, will do something right, will come to us, that there might be a situation that hasn't yet been touched by that cybernetic principle. It is the cybernetic principle working in operation. So this prayer says the divine cybernetic principle, love, is everywhere, is ever present, and always, no matter what is happening, no matter what we are doing in our experience, no matter what phenomenon we see in our experience, it's love's phenomenon. Thy will be done. Enable us to know, as in heaven, so on earth, God is omnipotent, supreme. And so we reach some sort of equifinality of that spiritual self-organizing process that we have undergone at the point of principle in the text and the prayer of principle. And we see that behind that, all the while, was the divine attractor, the divine fact of the self-organizing principle itself, of principle itself, the deep structure of principle itself. And so our prayer at that point is the prayer of principle. And Mrs. Eddy states it. It's the prayer that says, enable us to know. Give us the scientific understanding to know that at all levels there's only one thing going on. Only one divine cybernetic principle at all levels. And that's love. That self-organizing principle is love. It's organizing the universe. It is omnipotent. It is supreme over all. It's all the power there is, governing all events universally. Life. Give us this day our daily bread. And I hear day. I fall back to what we saw in the text, that we are given what we need according to our day. And here is now life coming in, the prayer of life within us. Give us, not give me, let me have, give us, and it's the reverent prayer of love within us, the praise and glory within us. Give us this day our daily bread, the bread of life, the word of life. The bread of life is the word of life. Feed us with the word of life. Give us grace for today, Mrs. Eddy says. Feed the famished affections so that self-organizing principle that is operating at all levels, as we saw, it is the cybernetic principle at all levels, is feeding us, feeding back, constantly feeding everything. That feeding becomes the redundancy principle of life, doesn't it? So that I really become, I am the fed back of principle. I'm that which principle has fed back, is feeding back, has fed through its system. Again and again and again. So always new, right? I'm always new because I'm constantly being fed by that principle through its system and as its system, out of the system, through the system, as the system, for the system. This is the feeding that brings forth the growth in grace, that we grow in grace. So we see that behind, that actually we come to the equifinality of the autopoiesis within us at the point of life, and that the divine attractor behind the whole process has been the redundancy principle of life, has been life itself, affecting in us growth in grace. And so we come to the prayer of truth, love, which is the prayer of truth within us, the praise really of life within us leads us to truth, as though we would say to love at the point of life, give us the grace of your flow, the flow of your feedback every day, let that be the only feedback in our lives, and that this will feed every famished sense within us, that which is famished within us is that which is like life, like the flow of life, and wants the flow of life. And that as truth, this gives us the solvency of love. The solvency of love that we are forgiven our debts as we forgive our debtors. It is the pure reflection within us where there are no debts, no flaws in that complexity, no inconsistency within that complexity of consciousness. So this is, when you speak of your debts, you want to be solvent from your debts. That is love that gives you the solvency by saying love is reflected in love. You are the reflection of love, the pure reflection of love. A maximum state of being like love at the point of truth, which is wholeness, holism, absolute consistency, being without an error. It's complete reflection. So love only knows loveliness at this point. We know the loveliness of love, knowing us as loveliness. It may be the prayer to love, to say, make us solvent, make us work as you work, operate as you operate, being organized as you are organized, because this is no debt. There's no debt in that state of being. Love reflects itself in love. And so we come to the prayer of love as love. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. And God leadeth us not into temptation. It's lifted up. Mrs. Eddy lifts it up to the scientific fact. She gives to the Lord's Prayer the touch, the tone of science. God leadeth us not into temptation. We can see that from the whole development of the chapter, that we have never been led into temptation. Whether we were at the point of those temptations to try to get around the system or to leave the system, to defeat the system, to compromise it, whatever, there never was a temptation from love. And the whole thing that looked like temptations was love, testing the integrity of that system until it could bring it to the point of love being reflected in love. And so love leadeth us not into temptation, but delivereth us from sin, disease, and death, from the belief of not being one with love. And love delivers us from, therefore, the one evil, the noumenon of evil. Everything is brought home to love, is seen to be in love, is one with love, and love is the only noumenon. And so those are the 7 prayers, and if we were to go back and look at them again, we would see that they are nested in the calculus, aren't they? The 7 are always nested in the 4. And so the prayer of mind and spirit is the prayer of the Word as the Word, of the perfect nature of being, the perfect nature of the divine cybernetic principle, love, or the one ego, as the Father, Mother, mind, and as the adorable one Spirit. And that soul and principle then show us the Word as the Christ, the operative power and control of that one divine cybernetic principle, love, the self-expression of that principle, the self-regulation of that principle, ever presently self-established as soul and self-demonstrated at all levels as principle. And then life, truth, and love show us the Word as Christianity, the growth in grace, the inexhaustibility of that love which is life, the feedback principle of life, feeding us and feeding us, that this is the effect of the Word as the Word and the Word as the Christ. It's the outcome that we are of the same nature. The outcome is of the same nature, the same power as the Word and the Word as the Christ. And then we come to the Word as science. And this, she says, may be an addition to the text, but she says it doesn't matter. The meaning doesn't change. The meaning isn't affected. And we come to the standpoint of science as depicted by the text depicting the eternal state of being, the beingness, the eternal state of the beingness of this divine cybernetic principle, love. For thine, and what is the thine now? It's all 7 standpoints. Love is mind, love is spirit, love is soul, love is principle, love is life, love is truth, and love is love. As word is word is Christ, word is Christianity. Now we come to word as science. Thine is the kingdom. The kingdom is yours. The kingdom is the kingdom of the divine self-organizing principle, love. And the power is the power of the divine self-organizing principle, love. And the glory is the glory of the divine self-organizing principle, love, forever. In a way, we get a touch of the Word, the Christ, Christianity, and science again. For thine is the kingdom, Word, and the power, Christ, and the glory, Christianity, forever, science. And Mrs. Eddy says, what does that mean? It means that this principle, this divine principle, love, is infinite. It's infinite. All power, all life, truth, and love, in other words, over all and all. So that the whole prayer is lifted to the standpoint of the eternal state of that self-organizing principle, and that principle, which is infinite, is life, truth, and love. Almost though to say that God, which is the infinite one science, is divine science, life, truth, and love. Divine science, the divine principle, over what? Over all. Absolute Christian Science and Christian Science. And bringing it back around again to the infinite one and all. Just one. Okay.